All right, so there are some real changes coming very quickly in the real estate world, and I haven't really spoken on this lately, but I want you, my people, my clients, my friends, and even fellow agents, to kind of know what's going on, because this is going to affect you. So, number one, this is all due to a settlement that the National Association of Realtors has entered into, and the changes go into effect August 17th of this year, which is 2024. So let's start with, and I'm just talking this out, so this is not scripted. So let's start with number one. Starting August 17th, buyers, you will no longer be able to just call up and say, hey, I want to go look at this house. Buyer agents, or agents in general, will be required to have a buyer agency agreement signed with you before they are able to even show you or for you to tour a property. So the days of what we call the pop-up realtors, where it's like they get a phone call, they pop up, and they just go show a house, that's over with. Effective August 17th. And quite honestly, a lot of us have already started implementing some of these changes. So that buyer agency agreement is going to have a time frame set in it for how long the agreement is for, and it is also going to talk about how that agent is compensated. And so there will be specific language about how the agent is compensated, and you as a buyer are going to have to agree to that to be able to move forward to see houses. It will say whether it's a flat fee, whether it's a percentage of a purchase price, and who actually is going to be paying that. Now it may specify, let me rephrase that, specify in there that in the end the buyer is responsible for that fee, but there will also likely be provisions that say that if a seller is offering buyer agent compensation, then that's how the agent will get paid. It may say that if the listing company is willing to cooperate and share some commissions, that is how the agent will get paid. But it is going to be very specific in that agreement, so you're going to need to have that conversation, and agents are going to have to really show you what it is that they're doing to provide the value for you. So buyers, short story on that is, you will need to sign a buyer agency agreement for an agent to be able to show you homes. So you may think, okay, so maybe then I just go at my own. If I've got to sign a buyer agency agreement to tour homes, maybe I just go call a listing agent directly and I want to go see that house, and I don't want any representation. Totally your option. You can totally do that. There will still be some agreements, I'm sure, that you're going to have to sign with that listing agent. However, my caution to you is, who does the listing agent work for? The listing agent works for the seller. They have fiduciary relationship with the seller to look out after the seller's interests, not your interest as a buyer. So I would caution you on just going out on your own, because that listing agent is required by law, because they have a fiduciary relationship with that seller, to try to get the best deal for the seller, try to get the best terms for the seller. Okay, so be watching for that. Sellers, you may be going, woohoo! Hey, all right, I don't have to be, paying this commission, for buyer agency compensation. And of course, you're right on that. You don't have to. And quite honestly, it was never a requirement for you to do that. We've always looked at that kind of as a marketing tool for the sellers to invite that cooperation. So here's one thing I want to share with you sellers is, if you say, hey, I choose as a seller not to offer compensation to a buyer's agent, totally within your rights. Talk to your listing agent about that and the pros and cons of that, because here's what I want to share with you. Right now, in the climate that we're in, especially here in North Mississippi and in the greater Memphis region, here's what I'm seeing. I watch the trends, and I've been tracking some micro trends, and I'm going to do a whole other video on this. But I've been watching the trends, and 70% of buyers right now are asking for and getting their closing costs paid by home sellers. So let's think about this just a second. If 70% of the buyers out there need help with closing costs, it just begs the question, if they cannot come up with their down payment plus their closing costs, are they going to be able to come up with the buyer agency compensation? The logistics of that, based upon 70% of sellers are paying buyer closing costs right now, at least a portion of, leads me to believe that buyers are not in a position to be flush with that cash to be able to do that. So what I think is going to happen here is the savvy sellers are going to look at this as an opportunity and go, hey, I'm totally going to be offering some commission to buyer agents, because that means I have a broader base of buyers that can look at my house. Because if a buyer is represented by an agent, which most of them are, if they're represented by an agent and they cannot pay that buyer agent themselves, and they are going to have to negotiate that into the transaction, and you are hard and fast, I'm not paying that, I'm going to tell you, you are likely taking out a large chunk of your buyers. Now the agents are going to be saying, hey, I'll show any house that you want, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. If this seller is not willing to pay the compensation, then you're agreeing that you will pay the compensation. But if the buyer says, I can't pay the compensation, then that buyer is going to have a hard decision to make. Do they look at homes that the seller has made a hard and fast rule that they're not offering any kind of concessions or anything like that to assist with that? The logic of this is that, quite honestly, it's all kind of built into the sales price. So it's all there. And, you know, the news media is playing this up saying, well, you know, if the seller doesn't have to pay buyer agency compensation and the buyer pays it, then that means sales prices will go down on these homes. All right. I don't know what world those people are living in. But if a seller says, okay, well, if I don't have to pay Tracy buyer agency compensation, therefore I will lower the price by X number of apples, I don't see that happening. So I don't see this effectively making any changes with regard to what sales prices are. I think it's going to confuse a lot of things for a while. So buyers, you need to just understand that come August 17th, you're going to have a buyer agency agreement signed. Sellers, you need to understand that come August 17th, and quite honestly, actually in our marketplace, August 1st, there is a field changing in our MLS that means that we as agents will no longer know what compensation is being offered by a seller. So seller, if you're offering compensation to a buyer's agent, which I'm going to advise sellers to do that, because it gives you a much broader group of buyers, which more buyers means more potential on a higher price for so sorry, I think I just got stopped mid-sentence. Apparently my phone overheated. Maybe I'm just talking too much. But anyway, so the more supply and demand was really what I was going for. The more buyers you have looking at your house, the better shot you have at getting the right buyer in there faster and for the most money. If you cut out 70% of the buyer pool, logic just says that demand is down and therefore prices go down for you. So I'm going to highly recommend sellers that you consider offering buyer agency compensation, because you'll cut out a large portion of buyers who can't pay that on their own. But what I was headed into is that the part of this agreement, again, going into effect August 17th, is that the MLS, which typically allows us to show what the seller is offering as far as compensation to buyer agents, that field is going away. And so what that means is that for a buyer agent to know if compensation is actually being offered or considered by the seller, they will need to start calling the listing agents, because there's not going to be a way for us to know that otherwise. So when a buyer wants to take a look at a list of 10 houses and there's no way for us to know as buyer agents on if compensation is being paid or not, then we're going to be picking up the phone. So be sure that you've got a great listing agent who's going to answer the phone or answer their text messages, because if the buyer can't pay compensation themselves and they're relying on the fact that a seller will be offering that, and we can't get a hold of that listing agent, that house may or may not get shown if the buyer says, I cannot see houses that's not being offered on. It will be the buyer's decision, not the agent's decision. The agents, we're going to show you, buyers, whatever you tell us to show you, okay? And sellers, again, you need to just make sure that you've got a great communicative, ooh, that's a big word, communicative agent who makes sure that other agents know what you are offering, okay? Because they can't do it in the MLS anymore. So a lot of big changes, and August 1st is when that field goes away in our MLS here in North Mississippi. Here's the overall thing that I want you to know. If you're a buyer, if you're a seller, if you're a homeowner, if you're a whatever, I've got you covered. I'm going to be watching out and taking care of you, okay? And I'm going to make sure that you know what's going on and what's in your best interest, and then you make those decisions, okay? I'm going to give you all the best information, and I've got you covered. All right. If you've got questions on this, which you probably do, because I'm going to tell you it's gone back and forth, but I wanted you to hear from the, I was going to say the horse's mouth, but you know, I can do a horse sound. I like to think I don't look like one. Anyway, so I wanted you to hear it from me on what's going on. Call me, Tracy Kirkley, Crylike, 901-210-8045. Have a great day. And by the way, I'm sitting out here at Silo Square. I don't know if you can see it in the background, but I just love this area. All right, talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.